Good morning. Thank you, Matt. It's going to be hard to match the previous presentation, so I won't even try, but I'll do my best. We have a break, that's the good news, in about half an hour. Thank you for the introduction. So I'll be talking about SBRT, mostly focusing on lung cases with breath hold, deep inspiration, breath hold. And let me figure out this thing here. No conflict of interest. So in the next 25 minutes, I will try to cover the equipment that we have available in the clinic, also the QA process and the QA equipment, simulation, treatment planning for deep inspiration, breath hold, SBRTs, and also the treatment delivery process. As Matt was mentioning, we purchased the Align RT package in 2011, first only for our TrueBeam machine that was brand new at the time, and then also the Gate CT package. We figured at the time that anything better than going with RPM from Varian as far as 4D simulations. That was the goal to implement Gate CT. We wanted to move away from something that's either invasive or using an extra phantom on the patient's surface, and Gate CT seemed to be the appropriate solution. Our second LINAC was equipped with Align RT in 2012. And then interestingly, the first purchase was not a high-definition camera system. So in 2014, we were forced to swap the cameras because SRS treatments are taking place on the TrueBeam, not on the second LINAC that had the high-definition cameras. This is a picture of the TrueBeam treatment room. As you can see, the cameras, the center and one of the side cameras, the two in-room monitors of the TrueBeam, and the one smaller black monitor underneath the central Vision RT camera is actually a patient feedback monitor. We always had problems with particular patients not understanding the coaching for breath hold. So we ended up installing this camera up above, and that displays the coaching screen from the Vision RT screen itself, kind of magnified, and that helps some of them to achieve that ideal position when they are directed to hold their breath. Later in one of the slides, I'll show you exactly what portion of the screen is being projected on that screen. Some people using goggles. I believe Vision RT actually came up with a little device that can be clipped on the couch that seems to be very promising, but we had to do something else in the meantime, and that's what we chose to do. This is the CT simulator room. As everybody knows, it's just a single camera setup. There's no reason to have more cameras. This is only monitoring the skin surface. And we basically use this only for 4D simulations. One thing people can do is monitor breath hold during simulation, but because these cameras are mounted in the ceiling, as the couch moves away, you're not actually monitoring the breath hold. I think it's really difficult to draw a conclusion just based on that. So a couch-mounted camera that is actually in the works or maybe already available for purchase is a lot better solution for that. But regardless, for 4D simulations, this setup works perfectly. Let's move on to the QA processes. This is the so-called daily calibration plate that can be used in the CT simulator room and also on the LINAC. As you can see on the next slide, very fast process. The only thing that the therapists do is they set these plates up based on the lasers or the isocenter. They capture a few images determining that the cameras were not actually moved for some reason throughout the night. I have to confess, we hardly ever do any additional QA. Of course, for SRS procedures, there's their isocal phantom and calibration phantom, but for daily warm-ups, this is the only thing that's necessary. Monthly QAs are not really, unless there were some changes or some interesting numbers that we see, but this fast, quick QA in the morning is sufficient so far. But as you move into high-risk procedures as stereotactic radiosurgery or body radiotherapy, your machine has to be operating just as precisely as your cameras and surface monitoring systems. So on the TrueBeam, the machine comes with this variant-provided phantom and the so-called ISO calibration module, where you can verify that your KV imaging system and the MV delivery system is actually in agreement. And we are looking at the same thing when we do cone beam CT, and the beam is actually being delivered to that exact same position. Very fast, very automated process. Again, it applies a calibration or correction factor that applied to the imaging system, so it ends up at the same place in the coordinate system where the delivery system is. And a great improvement in the latest releases of TrueBeam is this happens around TrueBeam 2.0, 2.5, is something that's called the machine performance check. Now this check in the morning, and we kind of move it away from the usual output check, flatness symmetry check, ISO-cal type check, because this module itself, using the MV imager, the KV imagers, and the delivery system, and that phantom in a pre-programmed position will verify all these things. It will verify the output constancy, the flatness symmetry constancy. It will verify the KV and MV isocenter match. So this is a great addition to the TrueBeam, and again, easily can be done by the therapist, probably in about 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. What are the QA devices that we were forced to implement and purchase because of the stereotactic program? So initially we started with film, Gachromic films, and then the RIT film analysis program. That worked for a while, and it wasn't very convenient, but we did that initially, very fine resolution, of course. And then in addition, we were doing chamber measurements on every case. After that, we purchased the Delta 4 Phantom by Scandidos. There are two Phantoms basically out there for arc therapy. At least at the time, there were two, arc check and then the Delta 4. And we chose to buy the Delta 4 device because it has a different arrangement for the diodes detectors. These are in like an X shape inside the Phantom itself. Sun Nuclear has their detectors on the surface of the Phantom, and we felt that this will provide us with better resolution. Now, why did we do this? I've been a portal dosimetry user for a number of years. Unfortunately, unless you have the latest TrueBeam version with advanced imaging package, your imaging system will not be able to run on flattening filter-free beam and provide valid data for IMRT QA. So we had to use some kind of phantom, and that was the Delta 4. For end-to-end testing, Quasar Phantom was our choice. This is a great little phantom. You can move, you can program up breathing cycles, breathing amplitudes. As you can see on the right side of that phantom, there's a cedar insert that would be the lung density represented. I have several of those drilled out for different chamber sizes. That cedar insert also houses hidden targets. So the whole procedure, meaning performing a 4D simulation, monitoring with the gate CT, determining the breathing periods, contouring on the 4D scan, the tumor volumes, detecting all those hidden targets, and then delivering the treatment in the same fashion on the machine is pretty much can be covered by a phantom like this. And of course, we did the usual initial RTOG lung phantom irradiation in a 4D fashion to make sure that our program is passing their criteria, and it's independently verified. So let's move on to the simulation process for lung SBRT. First 4D and then breath hold. Initially, when we started the program, we were looking into several vendors and devices to immobilize our patients. But as it turned out, almost the least you do, the better you're off. I'm going to show a couple slide at least here, right here. Okay, so we ended up purchasing Bionix's board. It's an overlay, and then of course multiple pieces with the knee, with the bridges, with the foot holders, some vac log bags, arm holders, and all that stuff. Some vendors, as you know, have foils and suction systems and whatnot, but the bridges are very common. Now, almost all of them comes with an overlay. So we are having this machine with the flattening filter beam, the TrueBeam, and we are all focusing, delivering these treatments in an arc fashion on the central axis. Guess what happens? If you put these patients on this board that's next to the table, and you have an anterior lateral lesion, that gantry will hit the couch or hit the overlay. So this immobilization device that we spent quite an amount of money on was used probably 2 cases, and then we completely bagged it and started to use simply a longboard, which was very scary in the beginning, but again, with Vision RT and image guidance, we felt comfortable. So anyway, that's the last line over there, that we are using the longboard only now. You will see a picture later on how that setup works. The next thing is patient coaching. Of course, for deep inspiration, breath hold is very critical. How deep, how long can they hold it, how they are able to perform doing simulation or on the machine. But even for 4D simulations, we found that patients are anxious, they're getting ready for radiation therapy, they take their unusual deep breaths or don't breathe for a while because they think they have to hold it for some reason on the CT scanner. So even before a 4D simulation, I think it's strongly suggested to talk to them, speak to them about the process and what's required of them to do that natural, nice, predictable breathing cycle that we are looking for to avoid any kind of missing data or large errors in the reconstruction. The lighting conditions in the sim were very, very important, even on the machine. Doing your quality assurance at the same level of lighting as you capture the surface, or picking the right skin tone in order to capture the right surface is extremely important, because if you don't have a good surface, you won't be able to pick a right tracking patch, and then you're missing your signal from the breathing cycle. I'll show a few examples, bad examples mostly, so you can learn from those. So how did we move on to breath hold? Most of the lung lesions that are in the upper part of the lung will not move sufficiently enough that gating or breath hold is indicated. But as you get closer to the diaphragm, all those things are magnified, those motions. So in our clinic, we decided to apply a 1 centimeter cutoff, which means after performing the 4D simulations, the lesion moves more than a centimeter, we're just going to move on to deep inspiration breath hold, as long as the patient is capable of doing that. Just one last line on the bottom is the 4D simulation. QA, of course, with the Quasar Phantom. All these things can be mimicked using that Phantom. So here's the simple setup now. No backlog bags, no bridges, no foot holders, none of that stuff. Just a simple longboard. One thing about going back to 4D simulations and trying to figure out if you're going to do deep inspiration breath hold or not. At some point years ago, we tried those bridges to limit the motion of the surface, right? Limit the internal motion basically by using a bridge. But that's kind of defeats the purpose of acquiring sufficient data of surface motion. You're trying to perform a 4D simulation, but then you are suppressing the abdomen. There's no feedback to the cameras. You cannot put the two together, the VXP file and the image set. You just cannot process those anymore. So we really moved away from those. We're trying to do either a 4D simulation or deep inspiration breath hold, not so much compression at all. So here we go, the good or bad examples in the CT simulation. This took us a long time to figure out, learn about, again, the lighting conditions and just the capture settings that you can fine-tune as far as how long these cameras are on and capturing that surface. Now, that upper portion that you see missing is very typical. The camera angle that's mounted on the ceiling and the patient's chest are exactly at the same angle. So obviously, you're not going to pick up any signal there. That's why that black area over there close to the neck. Now, can this be used? Of course, because that patient might as well a good belly breather. That's an area that you can place the tracking patch on, and you're going to be just fine. If this patient is more a chest breather, that's when trouble comes in. But most of them are moving underneath the diaphragm, where you would place your tracking patch. Here's another great example, just missing the data completely. On the right lower corner, you see must be some kind of a Johnny rolled up and left on the patient's body. So those things have to be moved out, of course. And again, adjust your lightnings, adjust your capture settings, increasing those milliseconds or decreasing depending on the patient's skin tone. This is the screen in the CT, the gate CT screen. On the left-hand side, pretty much the patient demographics, and then the left lower corner, you will see the information about the breathing cycle. You can get information about the amplitude, about the period. One interesting thing I believe compared to other options as far as 4D simulations versus what Vision RT provides is how they report the breathing period. that caused a little bit of confusion for us because one of our satellite clinic has RPM. You know, they report the breathing period as a whole breathing period. Vision RT reports it as a half. So, you know, when you're trying to determine your cine duration for your 4D scan, don't forget about these things, because that's a big difference, using twice as much or half as much. Right side of the screen, you will see, normally on the upper side, you will see a patient's captured data. That little square that I have there is probably from the Phantom, from the Quasar Phantom, that plate that's moving up and down. The tracking patch is sitting right on top of it, and as it moves up and down, you're going to see the curve being created. Now, in a regular scan, 4D scan, you will see that curve going crazy a little bit when the couch moves, of course, right? That's a big move right there. It's not part of the breathing cycle. You're going to see this unusual line, but it's all good because the CT scanner and the program are synchronized. It knows when the CT X-ray is on and when it's not. So all those data are just disregarded. So here's a few sentences again about how do we choose free breathe versus DIBH. As I said, the 1 centimeter cutoff for the amplitude, and then we tried the compression belt method, but those weren't very good, didn't work for us very well. So how do we do the deep inspiration breath hold scan? The patient is being coached. They are told to hold their breath. You actually see a counter and a face on the display of the CT scanner inside the gantry, so they can see that how long they have to hold it. More importantly, we focus on the actual treatment delivery, because that's the time when they're going to be able to, or not able to, but they're going to be forced to hold their breath for 25, 30, God forbid, 40 seconds if it's necessary. And some are able to do that, some not. So in those cases, I'll explain you how we actually deliver the treatment to make sure that the breath hold is actually happening. Coaching the patient again. We capture a free breathing and a breath hold scan. Why do we do that? Because when you get to the machine, you need these two DICOM image sets. You need a free breathing set in order to set up the patient initially without a breath hold, to get into the ballpark, and then test the breath hold, how well they set up. Now what happens is free breathe, moving the couch left, right, up and down, in and out. Breath hold, you're not really moving the couch at that point. You're coaching the patient to go deeper or shallower, depending on how the feedback is coming from the cameras. And in the sim, we are not using the camera to breath hold, to monitor the breath hold. I find it more useful actually to look at their chest roll, look at their belly, and see if it stays the way it's supposed to be staying for a good 10, 15 seconds. We do the same thing on the machine. We have the Vision RT. We also focus on our closed circuit TV cameras and just looking at their chest wall to make sure that there's nothing happening. Treatment planning. So as I said, we have the two image sets, the free breathe and the breath hold, but all the work is being done on the breath hold scan. That's the one that we're going to use for calculation. It's not a 4D set, so it's, the Heinzfeld units are all fine with that. All the organs will be contoured on that image set, and that's the one will be used for delivery. As far as tumor volume goes, there's no such thing as ITV. It's a breath hold scan. We are using a 3 millimeter margin on the CTV to create our PTVs. But again, this is not an ITV anymore because there's no motion. Prescription, we did do 3 times 20 gray for breath holds. Those arcs are broken up 3 times when we deliver them. So every 120 degrees we stop the machine. But a 10 gray times 5 or 12 gray times 4 treatment can be delivered in 180 arcs. So they can hold their breath long enough. We keep doing VMAT. I've never done static IMRT. SBRT is only VMAT. We tend to use the 6F flattening filter free 90% of the time. Sometimes we use 10X. The big difference is we don't see a lot of difference in dosimetry. We are using AAA as far as calculation algorithm goes. But dose rate, as you might know, the 6X beams are 1400 MU per minute. 10X can be done in 2400 MU per minute, so that can cut back on the time substantially, and sometimes that's advantageous. What the planner does after they wrap up the planning is, I show you a couple of pictures about how a plan looks like, but what they do is they transfer the image set to the Vision RT workstation, breath hold, and free breathe. And then the therapist nowadays, initially we were the ones creating the ROIs, because it's such an important process to get those right, and you will have some sessions in the afternoon that I strongly encourage you participate, because our learning curve with ROI was extremely steep and long. And then we review the ROI before delivery. So a couple of cases here, just just you see the location, what are those lesions when we really have to use breath hold technique. You clearly here you're sitting down towards the diaphragm. And unfortunately, these people are old. You know, when they come back, there's a reason why we want to do radiosurgery, not surgery. And but 80-year-old, 81-year-old, 82-year-old, they hold their breath pretty good for 20, 25, 30 seconds. Here's another one. And then here's an interesting one. Just before I came here, this person had 2 lesions, one in the right upper and one in the left lower lobe. So he was treated for both of those lesions, 5 times 10 gray, on the same day, in the same session. We did, I believe we did the breath hold first and then the free breathe. And I tell you what, 40 minutes probably, and both of these were done. So that's pretty amazing, you know, just cutting back on the imaging time and relying on Align RT so heavily. So the plan, or the treatment, just to summarize all the steps. The patient goes into the treatment room, gets on the table. We're using the free breathing DICOM structure, image set, body set to set up the patient initially. Then we verify, switching over to the breath hold DICOM, how they hold their breath. Do they have to do more or less? Now again, back to the sim for a second. When you coach them about breath hold, that seems to be a recurring problem, that some do too much. You know, we tell them it's a nice full breath, but you cannot go too much, because if you do, your back start arching. That's very hard to reproduce in the treatment room. They're going to be doing this differently every day. So we're trying to tell them about an 80% full, comfortable breath that they can hold for that 20, 30, 40 seconds. That would be perfect. So we set them up, we check the breath hold, we come outside. What we tend to do nowadays on almost, not every patient, not on breast patients, but on SBRTs, I try to capture at this point. We have everything's in the green, but I for the free breathe at least, I like to do a recapture, because it seems like that the resolution of the camera capturing the surface is more suitable for monitoring throughout the cone beam CT process than the DICOM surface. The resolutions seem not to be aligning with each other, the DICOM and the camera, and there's a lot of jumping deltas when you have both arms out with the KV source, the cassette, the gantry. So potentially you can block 2 cameras at the same time, and if you have a DICOM surface that you're trying to use to monitor your patient, that can be tricky sometimes. And not making you very comfortable. So a recapture always helps. You know, as soon as you determine that you're doing the right breath hold, might as well do a recapture and use that resolution for monitoring. So anyway, we're outside of the room now. Patient is holding their breath, and we do a cone beam CT. Cone beam CT takes a long time for a breath hold. You're looking at 45, maybe even 60 seconds for a thorax scan. So what we just recently started to do is a half trajectory scan for these breath hold patients. That will be only 200 degrees or so rotation, a lot shorter than the full scan, but I'll show you what you lose on those scans in a second. I have a slide. So after we do the cone beam CT analysis, shifts are determined. At that point, we pull at the same time while the physician is looking at the cone beam CT, we are parking the imager already, KV, cassette, and the source is going back. Why? Because we want to have that beautiful, clear view when we recapture that breath hold shifted image. Gantry is at 0, all the arms are back. And all these things have to happen at the same time. You know, I'm all about saving time for these patients when they're on the table. Being like this for 25, 30 minutes is taxing on these older patients, of course, and the breath hold also can be difficult. So then we treat them, of course, with the newly captured breath hold reference surface, and then the arcs are delivered either 2 or 3 segments. And we don't break them up in the planning process. We plan for 2 or 3 full arcs, and we manually stop them on the machine. Just recently, we are installing the motion management interface between our TrueBeam and Vision RT, but I'm not certain how well we're going to rely on that actual automated process of shutting the machine off. Maybe for an SRS open mesh case, but for a long, I think we're going to still be using the human judgment, if you wish. So this is how the setup looks like inside Align RT, inside the program. As you can see, this is a DICOM surface. It's an SBRT left breath hold lung, lower lobe, and then we have 2 things in there. One for the free breathe and the other one for the breath hold. They are nicely separated, they are named differently, and then you see also that both of them has already captured images perfect. That's what you want to see. That's what you're gonna will happen on the machine. One more thing here. So this is not comparing the captured image, just the resolution, how it's different between. If you look at this, look at the DICOM, how many data points are there and how the region of interest looks like, and then look at these captured, a little bit less information, but works a lot better when you are monitoring this surface than the DICOM surface, at least in my experience, especially when you're blocking the cameras. So this is the right lower corner of the screen. That's the one I was talking about when I was talking about the monitor that's mounted in the treatment room. See that yellow line on the bottom? That's what they call the coaching screen. And you see that bar moving either down or above the actual baseline. And we'll be trying to teach our patients how to move that bar into the desired range, so they are holding their breath at the same place all the time. So here's the cone beam CT that I said. If you capture a full trajectory cone beam CT, you have the whole body, of course. If you do a half, this is what you get. Is it enough information? I think it is. You have some bone, you have some ribs, you have some spine, you have some soft tissue. You certainly have the lesion, obviously, in the center there. So we are trying to utilize this more and more often, because doing the full cone beam CT for breath hold patients, when you have to interrupt the cone beam CT halfway, and chances are you're blocking cameras all the time, it is very difficult. I prefer this method. I keep teaching the therapist, telling the therapist that when you see the deltas jumping, have one of your eyes on the imaging system on the gantry. Where those things are, how many things we are blocking. Is it reasonable? Is the patient moving? Let's look at the closed circuit TV. And that's why a good reason to have two therapists, the physicist and the physician, right at the console when we are performing these procedures. Not to mention the 10 gray or 12 gray dose. So this is something that was interesting, just recently happened to us, and this is very similar to what we saw in the sim on those images, when the angle of the chest wall is pretty much the same as the mounted camera in the center, and you're losing that surface area right there. Do I have enough ROI for this patient to monitor? Believe it or not, I do. All that stuff to the right or to the left and going down on the side actually worked fine. But I'm missing something that's right above the isocenter. Not ideal. What else I can say about this? Men who have very few details up in the chest, if you wish, are usually harder to monitor than female who have more topography, and you get more feedback, different surface areas. And that was it. I think we started the program years ago. We decreased on our immobilization because it saves time. It's more comfortable. The Align RD is cutting back on time because of the imaging. We are doing again one cone beam CT at the beginning, and chances are not a cone beam CT at all throughout that treatment unless something really interesting happens. Monitoring is on. We be capturing surfaces, and treatment time is down to about 20 minutes. We don't make any big deal about SBRT treatments anymore, which is sounds scary, but that's what it is. You get used to it, you do it fast, and you get it done right, if you can. Thank you so much. That's all I had.